How could you be so cruel? My mother screamed, defending my abuser. And in that moment, hearing those words, she didn't break me. She handed me the one thing I never knew I needed, a guilt-free ticket to leave them all behind. Hey everyone, it's Lila. Before we get into it, I just want to say thank you for creating this space where we can share the stories we were always told to keep silent. My story begins not with a whisper, but with the deafening crash of cast iron and splintering wood. It was a humid August afternoon in Minnesota. The air in our old boathouse was thick with the smell of lake water and gasoline. I was up in the loft, dust motes dancing in the slivers of sunlight, searching for a box of old photos for my mom, Carol. Below me, my cousin Brenda was watching. There was this unsettling stillness about her, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I remember asking her what was so funny. She just kept smiling and reached for a rusty fishing knife on the workbench. My eyes followed her hand, then traced the path of the frayed rope it was about to meet. The rope was holding up a 50-pound vintage boat motor, dangling directly over the spot I'd been standing just moments before. Time slowed down. I saw the blade slice through the last few strands of hemp. I heard the sickening creak of the pulley, and then chaos. The motor plunged, missing me by inches, and exploded through the floorboards below. It wasn't an accident. It was a declaration of war. If you've ever felt a chill down your spine from someone you were supposed to trust, do me a favor and hit that like button. Let me know I'm not alone in this. That boathouse. It was part of our sprawling family lake house on the shores of Lake Minnetonka. From the outside, it was an American dream. A beautiful log cabin-style home with a huge porch surrounded by towering pine trees. It was the kind of place you see in magazines, advertised as a perfect family getaway. For most of my life, it was. But after my divorce at 35, when I moved back home to get back on my feet, I realized it wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It had become a gilded cage, and I was trapped inside with my jailer. Every morning, I'd wake up to the beautiful, serene view of the lake, but the peace would be shattered by the tension inside the house. The silence at the breakfast table was heavier than any argument. My mom, Carol, would just hum and busy herself with making coffee, pretending not to notice the way Brenda would stare at me. Her eyes filled with a resentment so deep it felt like it could curdle the milk in my cereal. I was a guest in my own childhood home, walking on eggshells, careful not to take up too much space, not to breathe too loudly. The idyllic scenery outside was a lie, a beautiful mask hiding the ugly reality that this home was no longer a place of healing, but a place where old wounds were festering, waiting to be ripped open again. I'm curious. Tell me in the comments what time it is where you are right now. It feels like this particular kind of loneliness is a 24/7 thing, and I want to know we're all out there, sharing this silent understanding together, no matter the time zone. To understand Brenda, you have to go back to the beginning. She was born perfectly healthy, the first grandchild, the absolute apple of everyone's eye. My mom Carol and her mom were sisters, and my dad Robert and her dad were brothers, making us doubly related, intertwined by blood in a way that felt almost claustrophobic. For 3 years, Brenda was the sun in our family's solar system. Then, a fever spiked too high for too long. A febrile seizure, the doctor said. It left scars on her developing brain, stunting her emotional intelligence to that of a volatile teenager while her body continued to age. She was prone to fits of rage and a deep, simmering jealousy. Then, almost a decade later, I was born a late-in-life baby for my parents. And just like that, the sun shifted. I became my mother's new pride and joy, her second chance at motherhood. In Brenda's eyes, I wasn't her baby cousin. I was her replacement. I was the shiny new toy that made everyone forget about the old one. Her hatred for me was instantaneous and visceral. It wasn't a choice she made. To her, it was a primal fact of her existence. She didn't see a baby in the crib. She saw an intruder. She didn't see a little girl learning to walk. She saw the person who had stolen her spotlight, her purpose, her mother's love. And she would spend the rest of our lives making me pay for a crime I didn't even know I had committed. The abuse wasn't always as dramatic as a falling motor. For years, it was a campaign of smaller, insidious cruelties designed to make me feel worthless. The most vivid scar in my memory was carved on my 10th birthday. My parents, especially my dad, went all out. We had balloons tied to every tree, a brightly colored piñata hanging from a thick oak branch, and a 3-layer funfetti cake from our local bakery, my absolute favorite. All my friends from school were there. It was the one day a year that was supposed to be completely, unequivocally mine. I was standing at the head of the picnic table, my friends singing around me, the heat from the 10 little candles warming my face. I closed my eyes, made my wish. I wished for a puppy, of course, and took a deep breath. But I never got to blow the candles out. From the corner of my eye, I saw a blur of motion. It was Brenda. Her face was contorted in a mask of pure rage. She let out this guttural scream and charged the table, flipping it over with a strength I didn't know she possessed. The cake, the presents, the paper plates, everything went flying. The beautiful cake soared through the air in a perfect, tragic arc before it splashed into the murky waters of the lake. My friends stood frozen in shock. I just stood there, watching the frosting dissolve. And my mother? She just rushed to Brenda's side, stroking her hair, whispering, "It's okay, sweetie, calm down." It was never, "Lila, are you okay?" It was always about managing Brenda's feelings. Let me know in the comments. Were you ever the family's scapegoat? Type scapegoat if you were always the one blamed. Or golden child if you were the favored one. I genuinely want to see the balance in our community here. Through all those years, I had one unwavering defender, my dad, Robert. He wasn't blind to Brenda's malice the way my mother was. He saw it for what it was, and he refused to let it go unchecked. He was a big guy, 6'2", with a booming voice, but he had the kindest eyes. With me, he was gentle. With Brenda, when she crossed a line, he was firm as granite. I remember one time, I had spent a whole month on a diorama for a history project, a detailed replica of the Jamestown settlement. I was so proud of it. The night before it was due, Brenda snuck into my room and methodically crushed every tiny log cabin and clay figure into dust. When my dad found me crying over the ruins, a terrifying calm came over him. He walked to Brenda's room, held up the wrecked project, and his voice was low and steady. "You will apologize to your cousin," he said, "and you will stay in your room for the next 2 weekends. No television, no exceptions." It was the only time I ever saw real consequences for her actions. He was my shield. Then, 5 years ago, he had a massive heart attack while he was out fishing. He was gone before the paramedics could even arrive. His death left a crater in our family, and for me, it created a power vacuum. The shield was gone. To make matters worse, his will was a final act of love for me that unintentionally fanned the flames of Brenda's hatred. He left the house to be co-owned by my mother and me. He wanted to ensure I would always have a home. But to Brenda, the will wasn't a safety net for me. It was a legal document confirming her worst fear. I wasn't just a visitor anymore. I was an owner, an invader staking a permanent claim on her territory. And that brings us back to the boathouse. After the motor crashed through the floor, my ears were ringing, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My mom, Carol, finally came running down from the house, drawn by the noise. She saw the wreckage, saw me pale and shaking, and saw Brenda standing there, the fishing knife still loosely in her hand. And the first words out of her mouth weren't, "Lila, are you hurt?" Or, "Brenda, what did you do?" Number. Her eyes darted around, avoiding the truth, and she said, "Oh, Brenda, sweetie, you have to be more careful. That rope must have been rotten." Lila, thank goodness you're okay. She didn't just ignore what Brenda did. She actively created an alternate reality on the spot, one where her beloved niece was clumsy, not malicious. Where I was just lucky, not targeted. She grabbed a broom and started sweeping up splinters, as if she could sweep the horror of the moment under the rug along with the dust. I just stood there, staring at her, a profound and icy clarity washing over me. It was in that moment, watching my own mother choose a convenient lie over my safety, that something inside me finally snapped. The years of swallowing my anger, of making myself smaller, of forgiving and forgetting it all evaporated. The part of me that always made excuses for them died right there on the dusty floor of that boathouse. I wasn't just her daughter anymore. I was a survivor of a war she refused to admit was even happening. And a survivor knows one thing. You either fight back or you get erased. That night, I couldn't sleep. My chest ached where I'd thrown myself backward, a deep bruise already forming. Every creak of the old house sounded like a threat. I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, and realized that getting angry wasn't enough. Screaming and crying wouldn't change a thing. It would just give them more ammunition to call me unstable. No, this had to be different. It had to be cold, calculated, and silent. I never thought my life would turn into one of those twisted family revenge stories, but there I was, plotting. Violence wasn't my style. It was hers. My revenge had to be surgical. It had to dismantle her world without leaving a single fingerprint. And then, it hit me. Her sanctuary. In the basement of our house, Brenda had her own universe. For over 30 years, she had been building an impossibly intricate HO-scale model train landscape. It was her life's work. It spanned the entire length of the basement, a miniature world with tiny towns, meticulously painted people, little bridges, and miles of track. She'd won regional awards for it. It was the one thing in her life that was orderly, perfect, and completely under her control. It was the only thing she truly loved. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that to truly make her feel the helplessness she had inflicted on me, I had to derail her entire world. I wouldn't break it. That would be too simple, too crude. I was going to meticulously, artistically, and completely unmake it. If you've ever reached that breaking point where you knew you had to take your power back, not with rage, but with a plan, just type the year you're watching this in the comments. Let's mark the moment we all decided enough is enough. At 2 a.m., when the old house was finally silent and breathing around me, I slipped out of bed. I didn't turn on a single light, navigating the familiar layout by the pale moonlight filtering through the windows. The basement door creaked, as it always did, but no one stirred. Downstairs, the air was cool and smelled of damp earth and ozone from the train transformers. I hit the master switch, and the entire miniature world blinked to life. Tiny streetlights glowed, headlights on miniature cars lit up, and a soft hum filled the room. It was beautiful, a perfect, self-contained reality. For a moment, I almost felt bad, but then the image of the boat motor swinging at my head flashed in my mind, and my resolve hardened. I started with the trains themselves. I gently lifted the main passenger train, the North Star Limited, off its track and placed it on the floor. Then the freight train. Then the commuter rail. One by one, every single car was removed. Next, I went for the population. With the delicacy of a surgeon, I plucked every tiny, painted person from their place. The baker from his shop, the lovers from the park bench, the station master from his platform. I gathered them all into one giant, chaotic pile on the miniature town square. Then I unplugged every signal light, every building, and every accessory. Finally, the masterstroke. I found the main controller, the complex panel with all the switches and dials that was the heart of the entire operation. I carefully unscrewed it from the table, climbed onto a stool, and, using a tube of superglue from my dad's old workshop, I permanently affixed it to a high-ceiling beam just out of reach. My revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about deconstruction. A silent, painstaking unraveling of her perfect world. The next morning, I was the first one in the kitchen, calmly making coffee as if it were any other day. The silence was broken by a sound from the basement. It wasn't the usual gentle hum of the trains. It was a low, guttural cry of disbelief, followed by a shriek of pure, unadulterated rage that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. Brenda came storming up the basement stairs, her face crimson, her eyes wild. "What did you do?" She screamed, spittle flying from her lips. "What did you do to my world?" Before I could answer, my mother rushed over, placing herself between us. I expected her to play mediator, to try and calm the situation. I was wrong. She looked past Brenda's fury and straight at me, her face a mask of disappointment and anger. "Lila," she said, her voice dripping with ice. "How could you be so cruel? After everything we do for you, letting you stay here, you know this is all she has. This is her whole life. What is wrong with you?" There it was, the ultimate betrayal. It wasn't just Brenda against me anymore. It was them. My mother, My own mother had officially picked a side. In her eyes, my calculated act of self-preservation was crueler than Brenda's years of physical and emotional abuse. I was the villain. Her unhinged, violent niece was the victim. In that moment, I felt a strange sense of peace. The last thread of hope that I could ever make her understand, that I could ever be seen by her, finally severed. I was completely and utterly alone in this. If this moment of betrayal hit you hard, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. This channel is a space for those of us who had to learn to be our own heroes because no one else would step up. Brenda, emboldened by my mother's support, saw her chance. With Carol forming a wall of silent approval behind her, she lunged at me. She wasn't just screaming anymore. She was a whirlwind of flailing fists and sharp nails. I stumbled backward out the kitchen's screen door and into the bright morning sun of the backyard, tripping over a sprinkler head. My head hit the damp grass, the world spinning for a second. Brenda was on top of me in an instant, her hands grabbing for my hair, her face inches from mine, contorted with a lifetime of resentment. "I'm going to kill you," she hissed, and I believed her. I was bracing for the first real blow when I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. A beat-up Ford truck I could recognize anywhere had just pulled in. The doors flew open, and my sisters, Kat and Tess, emerged. They had texted earlier about taking me out for lunch, to get me out of the house for a while. They took in the scene in a split second, me on the ground, Brenda on top of me, and my mother standing on the porch, watching it happen. What happened next was a blur of righteous fury. Tess, who was barely 5'3" but moved like a viper, rounded the corner of the house and tackled Brenda from the side, sending her sprawling. Kat, my gentle giant of a sister, didn't even run. She just strode over, her shadow falling over me, and planted herself between me and Brenda. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, an immovable mountain, a silent protector. The cavalry hadn't just arrived. They had always been on their way. Brenda scrambled back to her feet, completely ignoring Tess, and tried to charge past Kat to get to me again. It was a mistake. Tess, moving with a speed that always surprised people, grabbed Brenda by the back of her shirt, spun her around, and used her own momentum to slam her back down onto the lawn. It wasn't a brawl, it was a controlled, efficient takedown. My sisters had grown up dealing with Brenda, but they'd also grown up with a father who had enrolled them in self-defense classes from a young age, wanting his adopted daughters to always be able to protect themselves. This was the result. As Tess held Brenda down, simply using pressure points to keep her immobilized, Kat knelt beside me. "Are you okay, Lee?" she asked. Her voice low and steady, a stark contrast to the chaos. I just nodded, breathless. My mother finally seemed to snap out of her stupor and shrieked from the porch. "Girls, stop it. You're hurting her." Tess looked up, her eyes blazing with a fire I hadn't seen in years. "No, Carol," she shot back, her voice cutting through the air. "We're stopping her. You should have done this 30 years ago." That one sentence silenced my mother completely. The truth of it hung in the air, undeniable and devastating. The fight was over in less than a minute. I had a few scratches and was covered in grass stains, but I was fine. Brenda, however, was having a full-blown meltdown, a tantrum of epic proportions, now that her physical dominance was gone. It was over. The reign of terror was finally, truly over. The aftermath was swift and decisive. With Kat and Tess as witnesses, and my clearly visible state of distress, my mother could no longer sweep this under the rug. Adult Protective Services was called. When they interviewed everyone separately, the carefully constructed narrative Carol had maintained for decades finally crumbled. Brenda was evaluated and subsequently placed in a long-term assisted living facility, one equipped to handle her specific behavioral and psychological needs. She was finally in a place where she couldn't hurt anyone, including herself. My mother was left alone in that cavernous lake house, a ghost rattling around in a museum of her own bad decisions. She called me once, crying, asking how I could let this happen to our family. I told her, my voice clear and steady for the first time, our family fell apart a long time ago. I just stopped pretending it didn't. I sold my half of the house and never looked back. Today, I'm sitting in my own apartment, hundreds of miles away. It's not as big as the lake house, but it's safe. It's mine. My sisters and I are closer than ever. We are each other's chosen family. The biggest lesson in this whole ordeal wasn't about revenge. It was about realizing that you cannot set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You are not obligated to endure abuse, no matter who it comes from. Your peace is a priority, not a luxury. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to walk away, to choose yourself, and to build a new life from the ashes of the old one. The world may never know the battles you've fought in silence, but we do in this community. If these stories speak your truth, subscribe and join us. You are not alone.